Instead of pitching, you got to reconfirm context. You got to deepen the problem. You got to explore implications. And you need to anchor before you accelerate. Anchor before you accelerate. If education sales has you second-guessing yourself, take a breath. This is a trust-first, relationship-driven market, and the old tactics, they don't translate. This show replaces guesswork with clarity and a customer acquisition system that builds a pipeline you can trust. I'm Josh Chernikoff, two-time education founder with 2 exits and a lead gen coach for companies in education. Through my EdSales elevation experience over the last 2 years, I've coached 210 companies to leads on repeat. In 2025 alone, I delivered over 2,600 hours of coaching to education companies. My co-host is John Gamba. He also has a successful exit, and now he's the Director of Innovative Programs and the Entrepreneur in Residence at Penn's Graduate School of Education. This is the only show dedicated to customer acquisition for education companies, so consistent listeners go from stalled deals to clarity, credibility, and a pipeline they can rely on. This is EdSales Edge, where education company founders earn their edge. Welcome to the EdSales Edge. Today, things are about to get very real for you and for me. The title of this show is called Terry Gross, Raise Your Hand, and the Discipline of Asking Better Questions. So, let's be real. At heart, I was, and I still am, a journalist. That's how I'm wired. I respect great reporting. I love great reporting. I respect preparation. I love preparation. I respect thoughtful questioning, and yes, I love thoughtful questioning. And one journalist I've always respected more than anyone else is the great Terry Gross. Fresh air wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It was discipline. And the discipline was in the questions. The discipline is what drew me in. I didn't know it at the time, but the way Terry Gross interviews people would become the blueprint for how I built my education companies. Yeah. And eventually, how we built the Raise Your Hand campaigns that over 223 companies in the education space who have been through the EdSales Elevation experience have used. Yeah, the Raise Your Hand campaign is based on journalists like Terry Gross. So let me talk a little about my background. I grew up in Washington, D.C. Every single day, my dad would hand me the Washington Post sports section. I would read that thing cover to cover, page to page, word to word. Unfortunately, the Washington Post sports section has been cut. We're not going to get into that, though. But my love of journalism, while it started with the Washington Post, it didn't end there. The George Michael Sports Machine was filmed at NBC4 on Nebraska Avenue, Northwest Washington, D.C. I was a big fan of that. I was there as ESPN was coming of age. All I really wanted to do growing up was be a journalist, be on TV covering sports. So, first, I went to American University undergraduate, and I got myself a degree in print journalism. I then went on and got my master's in broadcast journalism from Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism, something I'm very proud of. I went into sports reporting days after graduating from Northwestern. I went from Chicago to Harrisonburg, Virginia, and the beautiful Shenandoah Valley, where I covered sports for several years at WHSV TV in the Valley. I was lucky enough to be recognized by the Washington Redskins. They were called the Washington Redskins at that time. My hometown football team were getting together to build the Washington Redskins broadcast network, and I was asked to go work there. Journalism, whether it is in the NFL, at WHSV, or you're learning it, trains you in one very critical way. If you don't know, you ask. You don't assume, you don't posture, you don't lead with conclusions, you prepare. And then you ask better questions than anyone else in the room. That training became my unfair advantage when I got into the education space. However, when I entered education, I didn't have any credibility. I started a tutoring company. By the way, I was a bad student. The only thing I knew about tutoring was I had a lot of them. I also didn't know about procurement cycles. I didn't understand district politics. I didn't understand the pace of trust. So I did what journalists do. I asked, and I asked a lot of questions. When I was going to homes and talking to families when I was selling B2C with my tutoring company, I asked the parents, how can I help you? And then I listened to what they said. And then I was able to take my solution for tutoring, their messaging, and offer them something that they wanted. Not necessarily just me talking about my solution. When I went in to schools, when I was selling B2B with my aftercare company, I didn't lead with, hey, here's my aftercare solution. No. I led with, where is your aftercare program struggling? What's been tried before? Why didn't it work? Why aren't parents enrolling? That was raise your hand before I really had given it that name. It was, I care enough to understand before I prescribe any solution for you. So let's get back to Terry Gross. Terry Gross has been hosting Fresh Air since 1975. That kind of longevity doesn't happen because someone is loud. No, it happens because someone is trusted. And trust is built through discipline. So here are the 4 disciplines that make Terry Gross extraordinary and how they map directly to the Raise Your Hand campaign. Number 1, preparation is respect. Terry Gross reads the book. She watches the film. She studies the record, understands the controversy. She knows the backstory. Her questions are specific. They're not generic. They're not recycled. In fact, they're very, very specific. In the Raise Your Hand campaign, this is what happens before someone ever talks to you. You need to do what Terry Gross does. You need to define your buyer clearly. You need to name the real tension they have. By the time someone raises their hand, you can't be guessing. What preparation also does is it lowers defenses. In education, instead of saying, let me tell you what we do, you should reconfirm context. From our earlier conversation, it sounds like attendance gaps in grades 7 and 8 are driving most of the urgency. Is that accurate? Or if you haven't had a conversation with this person, you could say something like, my research showed that you are having this issue. Is that accurate? That's journalism. Yeah, that's journalism. I love that. That's also alignment. There's that A word again, alignment. Number 2, safety before depth. Terry Gross doesn't open with confrontation. Not at all. She builds steadiness first. And this is where most founders in the education space blow it. And I mean blow it. A buyer raises their hand. You have your raise your hand interview. You gain clarity. Fantastic. And then the instinct kicks in. Oh no. Okay, now it's time to sell. It feels logical. Unfortunately, it's usually very premature. The first sales conversation, by the way, guys, is not for closing. The first sales conversation is not there for closing. It's for alignment, not persuasion, not pressure, alignment. Education buyers do not decide based on how impressive your solution is. No. They decide based on whether it fits their environment safely. I'm going to point this out again. There is that S word, safely. If you've been listening to our shows, we are using 2 words very, very often. Alignment and safety. So in that first conversation, instead of pitching, you got to reconfirm context. You got to deepen the problem. You got to explore implications. And you need to anchor before you accelerate. Anchor before you accelerate. That's Terry Gross's sequencing. Safety before tension. Now, before we go any further, I have got a short commercial for you. Education, as I have been pointing out, is a trust market. And if you are chasing leads, you don't have a volume problem. You have a credibility problem. The Raise Your Hand campaign moves you from cold outreach to qualified leaders starting conversations with you. And it always feels very good. The members of the EdSales Elevation Experience, when they do their first Raise Your Hand campaign, it's like a breath of fresh air for them. So if you want the Raise Your Hand credibility map, I got it for you. Text Raise Your Hand to 771-333-4233. Yeah, text 771-333-4233 and just text us Raise Your Hand. Now let's get back to the show. Number 3 for Terry Gross, curiosity over ego. Terry Gross listens. She builds on answers. She pivots. She clarifies. Boy, does she clarify. But she never hijacks the moment. Never to show that she's smart. Now, let's talk about what happens inside you when someone raises their hand. You invested time. You built rapport with them. You finally have a real opportunity. They got your message on LinkedIn. They've checked you out. Now they have raised their hand to say, I'm interested. Your brain says, you got to demonstrate value. You got to differentiate now. Move this forward before it cools off. That instinct, while it is understandable, unfortunately, it's the wrong one. That's the fastest way to cool off any conversation. You don't need immediately to demonstrate value and differentiate. The moment you introduce a solution before the buyer feels fully understood, they shift into evaluation mode. Evaluation mode, what does it do? It creates distance. Evaluation mode creates distance, and that's not what you want from your perfect client. Curiosity keeps proximity. So instead of let me show you how this works, you might want to say, based on what you've described, there might be alignment. Would it be helpful if I explained how we typically approach this? That's great. Permission keeps safety intact. That's raise your hand discipline. Speaking of discipline, let's talk about discipline depth. This is number 4. Terry Gross presses gently. She'll say, can you give me an example? What do you mean by that? She knows insight lives beneath that first answer. In the Raise Your Hand campaign, the first sales conversation exists to answer only 3 questions. Really, only 3 questions. Is the problem real and current? Is there authority and appetite to solve it? Is your approach a contextual fit? It is not, can I close this? Can I send you a proposal? Can I do a demo now? Those are 3 very bad questions. If enthusiasm shows up, don't confuse it with readiness. Excitement is not readiness. Readiness includes internal alignment. Readiness includes budget clarity, stakeholder awareness, timing. If these aren't present, do not push. Clarify. Clarity protects both sides. Close rates actually increase when you slow down at the right places. Yeah, you can close faster at times by slowing down. Safety accelerates serious buyers. Pressure accelerates hesitation. So eventually, I got to where many of you are. My tutoring program was working eventually. Our enrichment program was growing eventually. Business was strong. And that's when it mattered most, because once you have traction, the temptation is to accelerate. But I stayed disciplined. I stayed disciplined even in the first sales conversations, even when we had traction. Even when I could have demoed, even when I could have sent a proposal, I would reconfirm context, I would deepen the problem, I'd explore implications, I'd introduce the fit very carefully. I'd define the right next step, not the fastest one. And I still do that today. My coach for many years tried to take my process, which generally includes at least 2 to 3 touch points, down to 1. The old one call close. I don't believe in that. And frankly, I don't need it. My top of funnel is filled with high converting, high quality leads. That's okay for me to have a 2 call or a 3 call close. By the way, progress is defined by clarity and not commitment. Remember that. Also, remember this, guys. I'm here to help. If something feels unclear or your momentum has stalled for any reason, don't wait. Seriously, text me. Text me directly, 771-333-4233. Yeah, text me. I read my text. I really do. Tell me what you sell into education, where you're stuck, and I'll help. I'm going to help you get back to the show now. So let's talk about why this is Raise Your Hand. Raise Your Hand is a concept that I created through asking questions, through my love of journalism. So I know it very well to be based on that. I can also tell you what Raise Your Hand is not. Raise your hand does not pick me, I have the solution. It's, I've done my homework. I respect your context. Let's align before we advance. Let's align before we advance. It's preparation as respect. Safety before depth. Curiosity over ego. Guys, that's not marketing. Not at all. That's mastery. And Terry Gross would absolutely recognize and love the Raise Your Hand campaign. We're coming around the corner here towards the end. I've got one last thing I want to talk to you about. If you want a real lead engine for your education company, that is the work we do inside the EdSales Elevation Experience. Yeah, I can help. My team can help. Our community can help. Heck, I told you we've had 223 companies to date go through the EdSales Elevation Experience in just about 3 years. We show founders how decisions really get made, and then we build systems around that. Details to join the EdSales Elevation Experience are in the show notes. Let's close this puppy out. Terry Gross made interviewing amazing because she protected the moment before depth. I'm going to repeat that. Terry Gross made interviewing amazing because she protected the moment before depth. Raise Your Hand protects the moment before selling. We do not rush signal. We do not convert curiosity into pressure. We do not confuse activity with advancement. The first sales conversation is for alignment. The first sales conversation is for alignment. When alignment is clear, selling becomes natural, and that is the way you want it. When alignment becomes clear, selling becomes natural. When alignment is forced, resistance becomes, unfortunately, inevitable. So, do this for me. Channel Terry Gross. Because in education, the leader who protects the moment wins the long game. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Terry Gross, for everything you have taught me and journalists all over. All right, that's it for this episode of the EdSales Edge. Thanks for joining us. If you sell into education, the goal of this show is very simple: to help you stop guessing what actually moves deals in a system where trust matters. If you want to go deeper, join us inside the Entourage, our private community for education founders and operators selling into schools. You'll see the details in the show notes. If this episode helped you think more clearly, that's great. Subscribe, like it, and share it with another founder in the education space. Until next time, get clear, build trust, set up a system for sales, and keep earning your edge.